Okay. Shall we open with prayer? Again, Heavenly Father, as we go through your Psalms, again, we have two prayers. Help us as we go through these to relate that these Psalms we can relate to in various times of our lives. Teach us as we go through them that this is another resource for the Bible to reach us, that you reach out to us through these Psalms and also through the hymns we sing on Sunday. Abide with us, Father, as we study all of this and make us wise. In your Son's name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, today we've got two more Psalms. And this is one is Psalm 5. And it's about, they all seem to be coming about the same time. This is at the time of David, when he's again with the problem with Absalom. But it's prior to the time that it really has broken out in the public.
His son Absalom, yeah.
With his son Absalom. And what is now going on, David is just getting ready for the morning worship at the temple in the sanctuary. It
says David prays to God for guidance.
Yeah, right. The instrument that they use in this one is the flute. They're going to use a flute in this one. And what they did, they referred to the flute as a sound of a hum of bees. And that's how it was. But definitely they say it was the flute. And if we look at Isaiah 30:29, it talks about the flute. If I can get to Isaiah 29, I'm almost there. Isaiah 30.
Isaiah what?
Let's see, Isaiah 30,
30.
Verse 29.
30, verse 29. Okay.
And I hope it's there. Yeah. You shall have a song as in the night when a holy solemnity is kept, and gladness of heart as when one goeth with a pipe to come into the mountain of the Lord, to the mighty one of Israel. The mountain of the Lord is Zion. So here, this one, they're going to be using a flute. First Samuel 10:5 is another example of how they used it. First Samuel 10:5. First Samuel 10:5 in his Bible.
First and Second Samuel is before First and Second Kings.
Right. Well, I'm bouncing back and forth. Verse 5.
5.
And here we go. It's a split verse on this one, so you know.
You can read it on my Bible.
I got it.
You can see it right much better. Oh, don't read it.
And this is First Samuel chapter 10, verse 5.
10?
Chapter 10.
Oh, I didn't hear that one.
Verse 5. Did everybody get that?
10, verse 5.
Good. You're the only one that missed. You never listen to what I say. When I talk, I just don't listen.
Be quiet.
Everybody got it except the person sitting right next to you.
Okay, sorry.
After that, thou shalt come to the hill of God, where is the garrison of the Philistines. And it shall come to pass, when thou art come hither to the city, thou shalt meet a company of prophets coming down from the high place with a psalter and a tabret and the pipe and a harp before them, and they shall prophesy. See, it lets you know how much singing there really was in the Jewish church.
Oh, yeah.
And finally, 1 Kings 1, chapter 40.
I shouldn't have taken it long.
Well, it's... I can hardly wait.
Kings 1, chapter 40.
1 Kings 1, chapter 40. And all the people came up after him, and the people piped with pipes and rejoiced with great joy, so that the earth rent with the sound of them. First Kings, verse 40.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So he's letting that the flutes were very popular then. And what it was, this particular one, the way they did it, I have to check that out. I didn't have time quite to look it all up. but the flute would rise in sound and then lower in sound. You know, there would be a sudden rising in tone, and the people would get louder, and then it would begin to slow down, and the people would suddenly lower, and this is up and down of
But
the
they
tones.
don't have Selah to that in this one, huh? You
No,
know,
no, they don't have
'cause that
Selah
was
in this one.
similar
Yeah, right.
with that. Yeah, okay. Selah.
And
Okay. You can read it
somewhere
now?
in here we have 5. Yeah, there it is. See, God favors not the wicked. David prays unto God to guide him. And like I said, this is the time he's suspicious of what's happening, but not fully aware. But he also is going up to the service, and it's for opening worship.
Give me here.
To the chief musician upon Negaloth, a psalm of David. And David's praying.
Mine has Nihilo.
Nihiloth. Let's see.
And
Nihiloth. That's what I
H-I.
have. That's what I thought I said. Nihiloth.
N-I-G.
Oh, Nigaloth. No, it's Nihiloth. It's N-E-I-H-I. Nihiloth.
Okay.
Give ear to my words, O Lord. Consider my meditation. In other words, he wants God now to sort of consider what he's saying. David's got sin on his mind. He knows he's sinned, and he sees this coming up, this problem that he has as God's punishment for his sin.
Consequences. Oh,
Hearken unto the voice of my cry, my King and my God, for unto thee will I pray. My voice shall not hear in the morning. O Lord, in the morning will I direct my prayer unto thee and will look up. See, you can get a little bit of the passion involved in this. For thou art not a God that hath pleasure in wickedness, neither shall evil dwell with thee. The foolish shall not stand in thy sight. Thou hatest all workers of iniquity. When you begin to read this, you realize one thing about David and really the psalmists, they're aware of their sin, which I don't think really are all the time. We don't think we sin that much.
right.
But he's also saying, what he regards as foolish is many a time, I think that's where we are. The way when we look at God, what we think about it, when you start thinking about prayer life and all, what it actually is. And this is Rogate Sunday. This is what they're focusing on. How sincere actually is our prayer? We go to him when we have problems, but do we go to him when we're happy about something? And the other one, do we really expect him to answer? Or do we get the idea somehow, well, he'll get around to us. And this is what David's actually talking about. And he's saying, the foolish shall not stand in thy sight. Thou hatest all workers of iniquity. You really, I've been spending a lot of time just lately thinking, comparing about the time, when we were coming up and where we are now. And looking at all of that, there's a lot of things here in our day. Our parents would have just blown their minds on. They couldn't believe that we'd be involved in it, which we're not, but we are in many ways, and how different it is. But we've become used to that. And so we're kind of in this place where, well, that's the way it always was. And we expect it to always be like that. And this is what he's talking. It's not like that. Thou hatest all workers of iniquity. And he's saying about himself. Thou shalt destroy them that speak leasing. Remember, leasing, we had that word lies, last time. That's going to come up a lot here. Leasing. The Lord will abhor the bloody and deceitful man. And he continues, but as for me, I will come into thy house in the multitude of thy mercy, and in thy fear will I worship toward the holy temple. One of the fascinating things I found in the study when I was at Emmaus that I really didn't realize, and when I looked at Fort Wayne, it was true. If you look at the older churches were built on a compass. The pulpit and the altar always face to the east. And I thought for a while, I was thinking only Islam was like that, but that's not it. They always faced to the east. Now, I don't know when that changed, but strangely in Fort Wayne, the older churches were built like that. The older churches were built like that. Not all of them. I know when I looked at Emmaus was on one street, but Zion, which was a much older church, was down the street. I mean, not Taylor.
They faced each other.
Yeah, they
The two
faced each
street-
other.
One end of the street. And the
You
other
could
end.
literally, in those streets, if you took a bicycle, you could ride up the steps of Zion and then turn around and ride down, go straight ahead and ride up the steps of Emmaus. They were that's how close, they were far enough away, about 8 blocks away,
Mhm.
but that's how they were set up. And yeah, it was an interesting situation. Also, the pulpit is always on one side, the lectern is always on the other. And this is what he is saying here. But as for me, I will come into thy house in the multitude of thy mercy, and in thy fear will I worship toward the holy temple. And that's the Mount Zion, where he would be. And again, worship, will I worship? You see, he's talking about this whole preparation of what we do before we come to worship, and then what we do when we're at worship. And, I do think a lot when I was younger, Mom used to go into the church and she'd stand up and pray. And then when she got back from communion, she'd still stand up and pray.
Most people do.
And then she'd sit down. Many people still do that.
Mm.
But I knew in Emmaus, which was strange about Emmaus, even in 2000, we had about 8 or 10 women who still wore hats in the church. And they weren't, some of them were not that old. Some were rather young. So they still had this idea, they maintained the traditions of the church. But again, this is what he's talking. What is worship? And in thy fear will I worship toward the holy temple. Lead me, O Lord, in thy righteousness, because of mine enemies. Make my way straight before my face. Make my way straight. He's asking God to straighten him, to guide him. And he expects that. If we think about the personal contact that David has with God and what he expects God to, and not expects, he anticipates God is going to do this, but lead me, O Lord, in thy righteousness because of my enemies. Make thy way straight before my face. And he's counting. For there is no faithfulness in their mouths. Their inward part is very wickedness. Their throat is an open sepulcher. They flatter with their tongue. And that's still true. I mean, we've met people like that. They'll say one thing, but they really are thinking something totally different. And they don't have the welfare of the people in their minds. And sometimes it can be children like that, But this is what he's saying and what he expects. For there is no faithfulness in their mouths. Their inward part is very wickedness. Their throat is an open sepulcher. They flatter with their tongues. And this is what he's saying, where some people are like, there's more like that now. And I think as I get older, I become a little more aware. I haven't met too many like this, but then I realize when I think, well, maybe that's because we're all so much alike, but this is what there is no faithfulness in their mouths. Their inward part is very wickedness. Their throat is an open sepulcher. They flatter with their tongue. Destroy thou them, O God. Let them fall by their own counsels. Cast them out in the multitude of their transgressions, for they have rebelled against you. And that's true today. That's very, very true today. I know that I listen to the students talk, particularly the ones in California are really having a tough time with what's going on there. They can say they can go in a karaoke bar and sing all they want, even at their age. But if they want to go to church and sing, they're forbidden to do that and gather in small groups. So, and today is it's very much, this is not foreign to that world. But if you think about what he's doing, this is not a normal situation for David. There's rebellion coming, and he realizes what that means down the line. It would be very similar to America right now. There's no doubt about that. Very similar to American situation. But he's asking God for direction. And then destroy thou them, O God. Let them fall by their own counsels. Cast them out in the multitude of their transgressions, for they have rebelled against thee. And then he turns, but says, but let all those that put their trust in thee rejoice. Let them ever shout for joy, because thou defendest them. Let them also that love thy name be joyful in thee. See, the thing that's remarkable about the Psalms, and I find it kind of hard to relate to, but I know what he's saying. You know, he's got these problems and he faces them, but then all of a sudden there's this actual awareness, which we don't always have, because he laid his care before God, because he is a child of God, and not only because he's king, but God has given him responsibility and given us responsibility. And so he relies on, once he lays his concern before God, he acts as if, and he goes on living as if they were already answered immediately. And it's James that says, you know, if you pray and you don't expect an answer, don't think you're going to get one.
Well, that shows his faith.
Right. And it's showing his faith. And that's what he's saying.
If you don't have faith.
Right. But let those that put their trust in thee rejoice. So even at a time like this, you know, we can and should be rejoicing because of what we realize and what he's talking about. Let them ever shout for joy, because thou defendest them. Let them also that love thy name be joyful in thee. See, this is the strange thing about the church. And I've been more and more through, as a pastor, been more and more aware of it. But in the church, you're constantly dealing with people who have problems. And quite frequently, they have no hope. And yet, no matter what the situation is within the church, you know, we know that God helps us, and that we should never be hopeless because of recognizing what God has done for us and what he does through us at times. This is what David is talking about as we pass that word on, and the joy it brings to our lives, so that even in our deepest anxieties and maybe even despair sometimes, that joy is still there. Because remember, you know, this is, if you go up and say what he says, thou art not a God, on verse 4, thou art not a God that hath pleasure in wickedness, neither shall evil dwell with thee. The foolish shall not stand in thy sight. Thou hatest all workers of iniquity. Thou shalt destroy them that speak lies. The Lord will abhor the bloody and deceitful man. But as for me, I will come into thy house in the multitude of thy mercy. See? No matter what, he's coming in God's house in mercy, knowing he has it. And I think a lot of times we don't realize we have it. And I think many times we don't even believe we have it. You know, how many times, you know, something has happened and we go, oh, why me? Oh, this is totally unfair. This is totally unfair.
It's too much.
You know, and too much, or things like that. And realizing, well, wait a minute, there's something behind that.
Why
And
not here?
this is what this is where I've, through, when the last time I saw C.J. Bennett really kind of brought that home to me, because of how he accepted his problem, because I know how despairing he was as a teenager. And yet when at last meeting, he goes, I'm not handicapped, the world's handicapped. See, this is what faith does for us. It changes our whole outlook, so that even in our problems, we find that God is using them to guide us where we probably wouldn't ordinarily go if we hadn't had them. And believe me, I got to preach this to myself as much as just even talking with you all. I've got to keep remembering this. And then he continued, but just go back there to 11. But let all those that put their trust in thee rejoice. So when you bring your prayers, the whole thing is bringing the prayers and knowing he will answer them. Trust in him, because he's a God of love, because he gave his son for us. He's not, and as Christ said, I didn't come to condemn the world, but to save the world. So this whole thing that Christ has, and even when you look at the text today that we had for the gospel, you know, Christ is talking, that shows the love. He said, you know, now you don't have to ask because you know me, you know, but you do ask it directly to the Father in my name, because the Father knows you need it and he loves you because you love me. And there's that confidence that we have now this relationship with the Father through Jesus Christ, and anything we ask God, God's going to give us. And if we don't get it the way we want it, then obviously God doesn't want to do it that way. He's got something else in mind. And it's not that he's not powerful enough to give it, but he's got a reason why. And this is what he said. And as a result, in that kind of a world, their trust in thee rejoice. Let them ever shout for joy, because thou defendest them. Let them also that love thy name be joyful in thee. See, to be joyful in thee. For thou, Lord, wilt bless the righteous with favor. With favor wilt thou compass him as with a shield. For thou, Lord, wilt bless the righteous. And maybe we don't feel blessed because we think too much or realize our own wickedness. But it's knowing that we are righteous. We the ones we are taught. He's talking to us, all his children. For thou, Lord, wilt bless the righteous with favor. You want to go catch that? Just see. I can finish this in case that's Shemaine. With favor wilt thou compass him as with a shield. And when you think of that's over here. With a shield, that's probably our daughter. With a shield, when you think of the shield, the Roman shield, it protects us. And so God is always there protecting and guiding us. That's who it is.
Dan's giving Bible class right now. That's why we didn't answer the first one.
But you follow that, you see what he's saying. And I think this is important when we think about this, to recognize that maybe the problems that we're facing in life has been facing them on our own, and we're not bringing God into the picture. And knowing he's just standing on the side going, well, when are you going to call on me? If you really need me, I'm here, I'm right here. Just call on me. But we're not used to doing that. And maybe that's because prayer is such a small thing in our life. But then if the prayer is, then the faith is. So I hope this is, as we go through this, you can see once again with David, and you can see how this affects all of our worship. I mean, he's having tough times, and definitely we have tough times in America right now. But he is looking at that through a different situation. And also to bring in, maybe, when we think about what's happening in our own world, and when we think about the music that we now have, we've heard the string instruments, and now we've got flutes going. That the Jews love music, and as a result, the music is a thing that comforts, and it's really true. I know I learned that in Seattle. I'm trying to think. I know the doctors talked about it. You can get these discs by Mozart. And I know therapists use them. They did. I don't know if they still do, but they were using them a lot. If for a person who's very anxious and full of anxiety and sad, they'd give them Mozart to play. And there were certain things they could play at night. And one of the things they would recommend is that, if you have a lot of problems, what you would do is turn on the music at night while you're sleeping, because you still hear it. And it tends to relax you, but when a lot of the things we do, when we get involved in it, a lot of the things we do, before you go to bed, we usually watch these violent movies and everything else that's going on TV, and it's not made to give us relaxation. But what God is saying is, what at least David is saying here, he recognizes his sin. He's thinking part of it is from his own sin, but he's now in a place where he's thinking, okay, this going up to the Lord, this is how I will prepare myself for the worship that I'm going up to do. Any questions on that one? I have to do a little more work on some of these. We'll come back, because some of these, like this one here, the next one coming up, this is another one. And this is here. This one was also written about the same time. And because what they're doing, if you notice, we've been having these Psalms in pairs, 1 and 2, 3 and 4, now 5 and 6. And this is the one that says where he's looking at his own sin for bringing on the problem. And this is helpful when a lot of times we'll read one of the Psalms and we take the message of that one Psalm and think about it. But when you get a couple of them or more of them, you begin to see a trend. And this one here is an evening psalm, but it's a morning song, not morning crying, but it does have that in it. But it is a morning song, but it's coming after a night. David's had a very, very sleepless night. He's been turning and tossing, and he's been crying. David's a very emotional king, very just and very powerful and strong, but he's also very emotional because of his relationship with God. His relationship with God is not a hereby thing, no big thing, or it's it's here and now and not much later, but it's a very, very close relationship. And so this one night, he's been having a really tough time. He spent the night crying and tossing and turning and despairing over it. And it's probably, again, also at the same time, it's the realization of what his son has done. It's amazing. When we're coming up, our parents raise us and we never think about their concerns, but because we're too busy on our own. And that's for teenagers and kids, that's a normal situation. And maybe it should be checked, but it's still very normal in many places. But there's not that awareness of what they went through or go through and how we will walk the same path one day in dealing with issues in our own lives and have to face the same things they did. But because we're not attuned to what happened in their lives, when we get where we are to deal with that, we sort of think, well, we're new here. But if you relate to their situation, then you can realize what they went through. But that's also a learning experience, because it teaches us that many times what they did, was the right thing. One of the things Rosalie's reading in books by Hill, and she's a Christian writer from about 1880 something to about 1946. And it's amazing when she talks in there what they had, what types of homeopathic medicines that they use in their houses that we still use or could, and how much, we will go buy stuff at the grocery store or the drugstore that they made the same stuff out of fresh things. And it's interesting reading. Rosalie just went through one of those, and this guy was suffering from the croup, and the lady was getting different herbs and spices, and particularly herbs, and putting them together, and was working with them. And some of the things they were talking about, Rosalie said, this sounds like some of the stuff we take now and we pay big bucks for, and what she did was just put it together. She had they use a lot of broth beef teas, and apparently they soak the tea leaves in the beef or the chicken broth, usually beef, and then they take it, and it's supposed to work wonders on the lungs and the throat, and clearing up things and giving strength at the same time. A lot of times we get pills that fight the disease but don't do anything for the strength, where these seem to do both. The only thing I'm saying that is that if I was going through that, it made me think about something. And I remember reading somewhere a book about the pioneers from Nebraska. And I went and looked on it, and it was kind of an expensive book, but I found it very, very inexpensively. And it is hilarious. I read some of it to Rosalie, and she's going, wait, this is just what we talk about. It's the same kind of thing. But what medicines they have, and some of it reminds me of my secretary, Shirley, from Canada. She had all of these home medicine she would provide, and the way she would look at the day and what she'd talk about animals, and she'd watch the squirrels. And she said, I remember she'd come in, and it was funny because she'd say, well, squirrels have a lot of fur on them, Pastor. We're going to have a rough winter, And I found out, she's right. She was right. And I'm thinking, and she came up with a lot of this stuff, Well, the caterpillars are very hairy. It's going to be a long winter, Pastor. And I'm going, hairy caterpillars mean a long winter? Well, what about us? If we're hairy, does that mean we'd have a long winter? But she relied on, and that's in this book though, and it goes back to the pioneers. So a lot of these are old, and what I'm saying here as we go through this, you find what he's doing is he's going through these problems that he faces. David is calling back and turning to the Lord and finding comfort. And this is what I'm saying with us, going back to the Lord and finding that comfort. Like I said, he's had this tossless and crying. And the psalm, as the other psalms, if you listen, they begin with cries of distress and end in confidence of faith. Now, how often when we pray do we end our prayers in confidence and faith? I can't say I'm very popular on that one, particularly now when I'm 2 weeks now off of the logic class and thinking, good grief, I had to go another 2 weeks. I'm not sure I'd make it. But I'm thinking, give me strength, follow me through, help me, give me courage to make through this, get all through this thing and get it behind me, but it's not going, oh, I feel right. I already feel good since I turned it over to him, but this is what David does. This is what David does. And then he says, the hostile men appear to be to the poet as a sign of divine wrath against David himself. Now, another psalm, what we will find out in these psalms, Psalm 6 has a twin in Psalm 38. And also, they relate to Jeremiah, and we'll begin to look at that in a little bit. So this psalm here is for David, but it's also going to relate to Psalm 38, he writes later, and also in Jeremiah. Jeremiah is going to find himself falling back on cries from this particular psalm. It also has a hint of Job's problem in it. We can see how Job dealt with the problem. So this is a psalm here where the others were looking at David's situation, kind of spreads out in different parts of the Bible. And as Job had to deal with his temptations, the psalmist here is penitent and seeking. He's penitent, but as Job was trying to find out why he was being punished, David here has an idea why he's being punished. And now what he's asking God is to remove the punishment and let his loving mercy replace the problems that he's having now. And I'll just read that one, and then we'll go to Jeremiah and some of these others and begin to see what he's talking about. Also, this one here, because of the nature of it, the music direction is, he says, to the precentor, with accompanied of stringed instruments upon the octave. And this, when they call it upon the octave, it's usually the bass. And it's because because of the problems that David has. There's others who'll bring in stringed instruments. When he's happy, they'll use a different string instrument, like the one we just had with the flute. It has a mixed emotion it's going to carry with it. But I think what's important to notice how God uses the music and the words to bring home that the confidence of who he is and how he's helping us. So this one here has the string instruments, but it's the bass, and it's Psalm 6. And David's complaint in his sickness. And then to the chief musician in Neganoth. Remember, if you look at 5, it's Nehiloth. And again, Neganoth is what we were talking about last time. Neganoth upon Sheminith, a psalm of David. Upon the Sheminith is like a bass that they're talking about. And he starts here. O Lord, rebuke me not in thine anger, neither chasten me in thy hot displeasure. See, he realizes he's going there. And follow this, because I think David, in his deepest sin, has more hope in his life than many of us have in our lives. But that's because of God is a very personal God to him, and sees him through his tough times. O Lord, rebuke me not in thine anger, neither chasten me in thy hot displeasure. Have mercy upon me, O Lord, for I am weak. O Lord, heal me, for my bones are vexed. You can hear the despair in his, but have mercy upon me. He cries out. And it's interesting in the Bible, in the New Testament, how many times people cry out for mercy to God. And he does bring them relief. And what he always says on that, it's thy faith has made thee whole. So maybe could it be the problems we don't get the answer right away is our faith is weak. We don't believe it. It's very hard in today's world, really, very difficult in today's world to really understand and believe that God is there for us, not to condemn us, because he condemned us in his son for us, but that he is there to lift in our life and our hearts and our hopes. And that's not something in our world we can adjust to. And it's the one thing I found out, when I left New Orleans to Austin, I really missed it, and particularly the river. And I don't quite know why, but my grandpa tried to tell me that one time why it was. And he said, that's when you leave, it's because it's so big there and it's such an intricate part, and the whole life of New Orleans swings around the river. But I really missed it because of the river. But there was something else too. There was a whole, I met people who were so different than the people we met. I mean, I know I went to this one home and they had about 4 sons and a couple of daughters. All of them had a task on the farm. And when everything was homemade, I mean, sausages and all that was immense in itself. But what the mother would, once she got everything there, then she asked the father to open with grace. And then each one of the children had to contribute something to the prayer that they were looking for during the day, and that would somehow relate their lives to God for the day. And then in the evening, there was this Thanksgiving that they had for the same thing, doing the same thing. And I thought, we had never done that. In fact, one of the things I kind of had a lot of listen to Rosalie, and I think, wow. When I was at Austin, we learned to pray at every meal, but also give thanks when we were finished. Now, I never really got into that habit, but Rosalie has been in it. When she was in the parochial school at Christ Church, they opened with prayer, and then after they finished the meal, they would close. And she still caught it in that. And I thought, wow, here it is. I'm the pastor, I've been involved in all. And here's my wife, who just went to parochial school, caught in and still finds herself, praying. And like I said, prayer always has been a real rich part of her life. Even when we were dating, it was amazing. She'd talk about who she prayed for and how she prayed. And I'm thinking, wow, this is strange. But I saw this in the outside places. And when I went, and even when I got to Seattle and all, I began to realize, New Orleans was always called the Big Easy, but it's not. It's the Big Fearful. There's a lot of fear in New Orleans. It always has been. And we covered over with sort of this attitude that, it's the Big Easy. But it really isn't all that easy. There's a lot of problems that they face. And that's anywhere. But the problem, they seem, this relationship with God is kind of a godly life, where our lives are built around prayer and with God, and God determining things, and God is there, and he's a very important part of our lives. This is why also, I kind of tell Lima all the time, that when it comes to the church, she's a basic part of this whole thing. She really is a fundamental part of it. Because wherever I have been, they've put a lot of stress on the music. And you hear it here, look in the Psalms. We've got stringed instruments, we've had flutes, we've got a bass now, and this one here, where they have the bass. We haven't met the singers yet. So the music plays a tremendous part in creating the mood. And you see, one of the things that's been so clear with this, think of Disney, particularly Walt. No one used music so effectively as Walt Disney in his movies. You can really see it. I mean, he can bring tears to your eyes even if you're determined not to cry, and that's because of how powerful music is. And this is what they're using. Like here, you're going to have this, it's going upon the octave, the bass, and you're going to have that sadness in it, but it's going to rise up to a joyful sound. And again, as we continue, and David is focusing again on his own sin. But I think if we look at what he said, and more, there's going to be more Psalms like this. So that's why I'm just kind of introducing this now. You know, mercy and trust and the cry for forgiveness is going to be a part of most of these Psalms. The songs relate to the life of the individual. You know, a lot of times modern hymnody, particularly in the Reformed churches, is phony because it's just praise, praise, praise. And then you go to the church and, you know, Good Grief Van used to say, you know, he gets tired of that. He says, you know, I don't always feel this good. And I'm praising it's helpful, but he says, you know, I always leave empty because that's not what life is all about, particularly nowadays. And what he's saying, and this is what the Psalms, they express the soul of the individual. As again, he says in verse 3, my soul is also sore vexed, but thou, Lord, how long? You know, have you ever felt like that? I mean, I know I felt like that. I had a funny one right now, but it wasn't so funny at the time. When I was in the Mass, this one young girl had been waiting for the child to be born for quite a little bit much longer than she expected, and she was in a lot of discomfort. And one time she went through and she says, I have one prayer, Lord, Pastor, good Lord, deliver me. You know, I'm thinking, oh my, but it was so true. And then she did. She had a little girl, you know, and it was fabulous. I mean, she was so happy. But you know, we run into that in all kinds of situations, and this is where he's at. You know, how long, O Lord, will this go on? Return, O Lord, deliver my soul. O save me for thy mercy's sake. What he's saying is in his sin, and maybe this is what we ought to think about. In David's sin, he realizes that he has walked away from God. And now he's returned, O Lord, deliver my soul. Come back to me. O save me for thy mercy's sake. You know, how much, you know, and this is something to think about. How often does mercy ever fit in the prayer we give? You know, do we ever really ask for mercy? Or what we're really asking for is some kind of deliverance from something, but not really mercy. And this is what he's saying. Return, O Lord, deliver my soul. O save me for thy mercy's sake. For in death there is no remembrance of thee. In the grave, who shall give thee thanks? And that's kind of an interesting talk. Paul does the same thing, you know. When you think about Paul, the good that I would, I never do, but the evil I would not, I always do. And then he says, it's no longer I who do it, but sin that dwells in me. You know, what a way that almost sounds like a cop-out. You know, oh, I did it, devil made me do it, you know, and we joked about that, but that's exactly what Paul said. And here David's saying very much the same thing. For he says, you know, God, in death, I can't praise you, not like I can now in real life. And in the grave, who shall give you thanks? You know, there's one there. I'm here and I'm doing this. I want to give thanks, you know, and for this, I can give you thanks. But if in death, you know, there is no remembrance. But he's talking about the body too. Don't forget Job. See, this dichotomy we live in is fascinating when you read it in the Psalms, because the body won't give thanks, but the soul will be there before God. But as the body gives thanks, others see him giving thanks. And in the grave, who shall give thee thanks? You know, it's reckoned, we'll give you thanks, but others will see it. Again, verse 6, I am weary with my groanings all the night. Make I my bed to swim. I water my couch with my tears. And this is a really touching psalm, because I don't know if you ever had nights like that. You know, I can go back and think, not that bad, I don't think. Maybe I did, but I don't believe so. But there's just those nights when and particularly now with all this logic and everything, getting through all of this, I think, oh, I can hardly wait till this is all over, you know. And this is what he's saying. I'm in weary with my groanings. Again, you can hear that. How long, O Lord? All the night make I my bed to swim. I water my couch with my tears. How long? Mine eye is consumed because of grief. It waxeth old because of mine enemies. You know, just that burden of this overbearing, always somebody there to criticize, always somebody there to complain and fuss, you know, and where is the joy in life, he's thinking. But then he's going, but notice the despair here. And I think what's amazing is the despair, but watch, depart from me, mine eyes is consumed because of grief. It waxeth old because of mine enemies. And notice the change now. Depart from me, all ye workers of iniquity, for the Lord hath heard the voice of my weeping. Verse 8, despair. Verse 9, confidence. You know, the Lord hath heard my supplication. The Lord will receive my prayer. Let all my enemies be ashamed and sore vexed. Let them return and be ashamed suddenly. Again, that assurance. And I'm looking at the time, but I think we can still do this part of it. If we take, let me get our Jeremiah text, and I'm looking at keep the hand on some Jeremiah 38, verse 2. If I can get there, and I can bounce back and forth because the Jeremiah texts are really all in one area. Verse 2, thus saith the Lord, he that remaineth in this city shall die by the sword. Let's see, is that what I'm looking for? Yes, I think. Thus saith the Lord, he that remaineth in this city shall die by the sword, by the famine and by the pestilence, but he that goeth forth to the Chaldeans shall live, for he shall have his life for a prey, and shall live. Now, if we look at verse 2 of this verse, have mercy upon me, O Lord, for I am weak. O Lord, heal me, for my bones have waxed old. Now, again, 3, if we go 5 with 17, Jeremiah 17. And what they're looking at is the tone that he has here. Come on. There's 17 in this Bible somewhere. There we go. 17, verse 14. Heal me, O Lord, and I shall be healed. Save me, and I shall be saved. For thou art my praise. See if I had the right one for that Jeremiah text. I think I do. That first one. Okay, 2. Oh, that was Jeremiah 10 I was looking for. Yeah, 10. 24. I don't know if I read that one. This one here is Jeremiah 17, verse 14. Heal me, O Lord, and I shall be healed. Save me, and I shall be saved, for thou art my praise. Let me just go back and see if I looked at the right one. That Jeremiah, oh, I see what that is. 38:2 was a psalm. Jeremiah 10:24. But let him that glorieth glory in this, that he understandeth and knoweth me, that I am the Lord, which exercise loving kindness, judgment, and righteousness in the earth. For in these things I delight, saith the Lord. That's the one I was looking for. That 38:2 is another psalm. But Jeremiah 10:24-3. And
20.
That's not 10:24.
it's not?
On Jeremiah.
Oh, no. I'm looking at, I can't even read. Okay, I'm on 9:24. It's got Jeremiah 10 at the top of the page. O Lord, correct me, but with judgment, not in thine anger, lest thou bring me to nothing. Is that it?
That's it.
Okay. And you got Jeremiah 11 on top of this page, so that's why I blew it. Okay, and the other one was Jeremiah 45 in closing. Oh, not Jeremiah 47.
45 or 47?
45 verse 3. 45 verse 3. Thou didst say, woe is me now, for the Lord hath added grief to my sorrow. I fainted in my sighing, and I find no rest. Same situation that David was in. And that was relating with Jeremiah 45:3, and that's, I think they're relating that to 5 here. Yeah, for in death there is no remembrance with thee, in the grave who shall give thee thanks? No, 7. My notes are all messed up here. Mine eye is consumed because of grief. It waxeth old because of mine enemies. And again, this 45:3, thou didst say, woe is me now, for the Lord hath added grief to my sorrow. I fainted in my sighing, and I find no rest. I have to make that clearer. Oh, sooner or later, I will get this straight. Any questions on my stumbling or anything else?
Oh, we're used to that by now.
Yeah, you should be. Maybe in 2 weeks, I hope it'll all change. I'm not used to doing this, but. Okay, well, shall we close with prayer? Again, Heavenly Father, we thank you. Abide with us and teach us. And as we go through all of this, help us to commit our lives to you in faith and in trust, knowing that in you is our only hope, and in you is we find that joy everlasting. Teach us and hold us, and let thy mercy be upon us. In the name of your Son, Father, we pray. Amen. Okay.
Oh,
Yes, Joe, I agree.
It's a lot easier to follow you since I got a King James Bible.
It is? Oh, my.
I still have trouble.
He's got to get
I
his.
got to get one.
Oh,
Well, you better get and go talk to your daughter.
you know, that's really true. When I get on the phone, Charmaine's going to start talking, and I'll start talking. Poor Rosie won't get a word in edgewise. So if you
It
help-
is Mother's Day.
I think
right.
she had her shot already while you were tied up.
Yeah, I know. Okay, well, have a blessed day, and we'll see you all next Sunday.
Yep.
Okay.
Have a good week.
You also.
Bye.
Yep. Bye, Lena. Take care. Thank you
Take
again, Lena.
care. Mhm.